you work in food real estate.
I do.
I like that idea. We've never had anybody on the show working in like the food realm of the real estate. Not so much like the ratings in terms of going in and grading the cleanliness, but you are the one that finds the space that's going to be utilized best for your customer as they are producing food, correct?
Well, what I do is I work with local brokers. So I work across the country. I'm located in Ohio. We were talking about Oregon and all of some of my favorite people out there in Oregon. But I have customers across the country because I work in all sectors of the food industry. And I'm what's called a regulatory veterinarian, and I do food safety. Okay, so I teach butcher shops and restaurants and food not-for-profits who work with agricultural folks and farmers and ranchers. I work a lot in the meat industry, dairy and fish, and I help people like make safe food, of which I have to tell you, their facility is an absolute cornerstone of that process.
Yeah.
So that's why I know about food real estate, is because you can't make safe food on a dirt floor.
Oh, yes. That would be inaccurate.
That is true. And it's amazing like how, I don't know, I feel like commercial, like the big conglomerates that produce food, and the chain of command is so stretched thin that it's just machines running it. And then the people that come through and actually, like the butchers, we have a meat shop out here in Oconomowoc, and it's still like cash only. He cuts his own meat. It's the best thing ever. It's a small little shop, but that's where you go to get the meat. That's it.
Exactly.
And it tastes so much different.
Right. When you have short supply chains like we work for in local and sustainable meat production, a short supply chain means that the meat is fresher. The other thing that it means is that you're supporting local farms. And when you want to talk about real estate, that makes all our real estate more valuable when we've got green spaces that where animals can grow and they can be part of the production cycle, and it makes a real difference in our quality of life.
My husband wants to be known as the Wisconsin cheese guy. So he like searches out local cheese shops that like just produce cheese here in Wisconsin, or like when we're out in Oregon, he does the same thing out there too. He's a cheese aficionado.
That is a hard crown to wear here in Wisconsin.
I know.
We are all about cheese.
We already have our cheese curds ranking of like the best fried cheese curds in Wisconsin. I won't go into that, but we do.
I was just down on an account on Wednesday, and we had stopped and got food, and he was like, "Yeah, these guys are great. They never mess up food. So like, we're gonna be great. Order what you want." And he was like, "My dad never eats cheese." And I was like, "Oh, is that like a doctor's thing that he told him to lay off the cheese for health reasons?" He's like, "No, he just doesn't like cheese." And I like sat and I was in the passenger seat, and all I could think about was like, "You're not from here. Like, where are you from that you're not eating cheese?" They're from out east. So cheese is not part of their culture. So that made sense.
I don't know. I spent a lot of time. I grew up in New York and Connecticut, and I moved to Ohio from Maine, and I work with a lot of local cheese producers in Maine that make really, oh my God, amazing both cheese and butter.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband likes butter a lot too. That's his like I think main food group, but I'm not sure.
So Michelle, before we jump into like the details of what you do, before the show we were talking about kind of 3 buckets of the food industry in terms of when it needs to move to commercial, kind of like your main tier, then you step up, and then you've got your high, I would say regulatory.
Yes. So all food is, if you're putting food into the commercial food stream in any way, it's all regulated in some form or fashion. But when it comes to real estate, there are really kind of 3 spaces that we look at. We look at home and cottage kitchens. So home and cottage kitchens are all regulated by state cottage food laws, and they vary greatly from state to state, okay? Most of the time, you can make food in your home kitchen if you can prove the animals don't get in, Okay, so I recommend lots of gaskets on your doors. If you can prove you can keep things segregated, you don't have, you have labeling around allergens because there's like no allergen separation, and you're not making anything quote unquote high risk. So lots of bakery items, granola, dried foods that you're basically cooking, selling at the farmer's market, that sort of thing. That's all totally appropriate for a home cottage kitchen. You apply for that through, you just Google your state and cottage kitchen and you can find out what you can make. Some places you can make jams and jellies, not all of them. But what happens with people is that they outgrow that. If you make really amazing, I don't know, like cheddar cheese scones, right? Y'all are in Wisconsin and you're making cheddar cheese scones and people really love them. You soon outpace the volume a like your own kitchen can do, let alone, I got a big old Cuisinart and I got a big old KitchenAid, and I can make 3 pans of scones at once. But if you're going to a popular farmer's market and selling that, if you're doing really well, that's like an hour's worth of product. Right.
Yeah.
And so then you outgrow your own kitchen at home. And then you got to move to some level of commercial kitchen. Okay. Now, commercial kitchen is a legal designation, and there are all sorts of ways that you can get access to a commercial kitchen. Okay. Lots of places have food incubators with commercial kitchens. The other people who have commercial kitchens that nobody ever thinks about? It's your local house of worship. And who's really poor right now? Your local house of worship, right? Because they're either using it after Shabbat services on Friday and shul on Sunday, or they're using it after mass on Saturday night and on Sunday during the day for like post-mass coffee, or whenever, whenever your house of worship has people, usually they use their commercial kitchen, but most of the time they don't have people, right? Overnight, they definitely don't have people. And I know tons of people who go into, as a matter of fact, I have my butter client in Maine. They started out at the local Unitarian church making butter overnight because that was the commercial kitchen that they could get access to.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure they would love to subsidize and have somebody rent it when they're not using it.
Exactly, right? Because they've already gone through all the regulatory hurdles and all they're doing is to get to you. Right? And so when you're doing food manufacturing, I always tell people, sell your product first. Do whatever it is that you can. And I've got some workarounds for high-risk products if people want to come find me on Instagram at Food Safety University and ask me questions. It's totally fine. But
we'll definitely put that in the show notes.
Yeah. So if you have I'm not doing it in a podcast, but if you have higher risk products, there are things that we can do to get higher risk products out there in a legal manner where you can actually sell your product before you go and lease on do a lease on a commercial kitchen with your local church, right? So then you're gonna sell stuff and grow into this commercial kitchen, right? Then your goal in life is to maximize your utilization of that commercial kitchen, okay? Before you go looking for a manufacturing facility, right? And then people have a choice to make. Are they going to do their own higher scale manufacturing, or is somebody else going to do it? If you're going to do your own higher scale manufacturing, that's when you need to look for a broker and interview your broker. Okay, you have to talk to a real estate professional that has done food facility deals before. Because there are make or break things in food facilities, especially if you're doing a ready to eat food. And it's incredibly important that you work with a real estate agent who, when you say the word listeria, is not like, why do we care about that? It's a great space.
Yeah.
Because that's not how this rolls.
Yeah. And that's the big thing between commercial and residential. Like residential, you've got your single family, you've got your duplex up to your 4, and then you flip over to commercial. commercial is literally the Wild West. Like you need a building, yes, and your building needs to be legal, but that's not the reason you have the building. You have the building to run your business. So your business also needs to be legal. It needs to be clean. It needs to follow the guidelines. So you have two things that you need to follow here to make sure that you're successful in your space, all along while your pricing works. So there's a lot of things to juggle. And if you go in with a commercial broker who's done commercial deals and they've sold auto dealerships and other things, then they're like, hey, we can do a kitchen for you too. If they haven't done food, they're going to miss some things that are necessities for you. So I do agree, interview your broker, make sure that they're in the food industry so that they can guide you in the correct path like you do with your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that they know that somebody like me who's asking questions and saying, before you sign a 5-year triple net lease where you're going to have to go do $100,000 of build out, that that's, you better build your business plan so you get that $100,000 back in 5 years, because your rent's going up at the end of 5 years. I tell you that.
Yep.
Right. That happens to my clients all the time. But it's really important that your broker knows that you're not throwing up hurdles on signing the lease just to be a jerk. You really do have to go and swab the drains and swab the floors to find out if there's, for example, Listeria or Salmonella there, right? I had a client who, not in Wisconsin, they were in Michigan, but they wanted to manufacture cheese, and they leased a facility that had held potatoes. Because you might not know, there's actually a potato industry in Michigan. It's pretty good soil for potatoes, actually. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, potatoes are they're roots, right? And Listeria is always associated. Like any root vegetable basically will have Listeria when it comes out of the ground, because it's a bacteria that lives in the soil. Yeah. And it's a very common bacteria outside. All farms have Listeria, right? And so they rented they leased a facility, this big old facility to make cheese. And they 6 months in, they have Listeria positives on the cheese, right? Which is automatic recall. It's a very, very big deal.
Didn't they just have a big Listeria scare with iceberg lettuce coming from the West Coast like 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, well, there was, so 5 or 6 years ago out on the West Coast, it was frozen vegetables. And it was the largest manufacturer of frozen vegetables in the country. Had Listeria all over their frozen vegetables. So and it's nuts.
I heard about that one. I don't know. I didn't follow up to see how they rectified it or fixed it all, but there was
buildings.
What is that?
They moved buildings.
They did? Okay.
Yeah, because Listeria, so this is why in facilities, we worry about Listeria particularly, okay? It's because Listeria forms a biofilm, right? And it forms a biofilm, which is kind of like what your dentist scrapes off when you go to the dentist. So it's not something you can brush your teeth to get rid of. Your dental hygienist actually has to scrape it off. That's what Listeria forms in drains, in hose lines, on the undersides of tables that people forget to clean, in the walk-in, in all those corners, and all, everybody's walked into a walk-in cooler where you're like, I wonder where the body is buried.
Yeah.
And the Listeria lives in there and forms this biofilm, and you can't get rid of it. And so if you are making anything close to a ready-to-eat food, you really need to know whether or not the facility you are leasing has Listeria. And the only way to know that is to swab, and we swab before we sign the lease.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, there's testing in both the residential and commercial space that are things you have to do. In the residential, it's something like radon, but you can mitigate that. There's asbestos testing, there's mold testing, all those kind of things. I would make the argument that is kind of the commercial side of what you need to test for, at least in the food industry.
And water potability testing is really important because, and do not just take the town's water report as good enough, because I have also had clients where they had leaks between the street and their hose bibs. Okay, and they got coliforms, which is like a sign of unsanitary water. No pathogens or anything, just coliforms. But you can't sell stuff as ready to eat with high coliforms. And we took, we did everything with that place. They asked the landlord if the landlord would be willing to work on the pipes, and he's like, no. And so we had to install a $30,000 UV filtration system.
Oh, geez.
Because it was, it's like a last mile problem. It was between where the town water was fine, and it was the 40 feet between the town water and their hose bibs. So when you were doing your due diligence on your property, do an accurate tap water from a hose bib or your 3-bay sink or even the bathroom. Do that water potability testing.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. Test it right from the source.
Correct.
That stinks that they signed the lease and then had to pump another 30,000 into it. Hopefully that at least fixed their problem.
No, the landlord refused to fix the problem. He said,
well, the UV test, the UV.
Oh yeah, the UV
filtration.
And they took it with them. And then now the landlord can't rent the space for food production because it's a known issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're a landlord listening to this, for heaven's sakes, don't be like that.
Yeah, it's gonna come back and bite you. I mean, that's the same thing as you test for mold. Now you know it's mold. You have to market it as you know it's mold.
Exactly.
Once you get the testing.
Exactly.
Craziness. You were talking before we started the show about one of your clients or I don't know if it was your client or not, but someone that you knew that was in the food production rented a brick building.
No, they're definitely in food production. So here's the thing, is that if you are going and doing any sort of process where your product is open to the atmosphere, okay, you need to do it in a room that is washable. And they were searching for production space, and they're in the greater Las Vegas metropolitan area, of which there is really not a lot of food production space. And this is another thing that's happening in the marketplace, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But like building fabrics and materials and things like that make a real difference about how much build out you are going to have to do in a food facility, which is one of the reasons why I say go to a commercial kitchen that's already licensed first, because they will have taken care of all of this. But when you outgrow that, you got to move to a place where the fabrics of your building are cleanable, and brick is not cleanable. You cannot, cut down half hogs and sides beef and things like that in a facility that is brick. You've got to put FRP paneling or something like that. And so we went back and forth. I will also tell you, if you are doing build out, please find a contractor who has done food facilities before, because this contractor wanted to get into a fight with me about whether or not an epoxied brick wall would need inspection. And so my response to him was, can you show me where you epoxied a brick wall?
Right. I mean, you would just think like brick it's not like it can chip and like break and like, no.
Right. I don't think brick is epoxy.
Yeah, I don't know because it's porous. So I just don't know how well the brick would hold on to the epoxy, because the epoxy, when it binds, it grabs.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, ivy pulls brick apart. Exactly. You get ivy going up brick walls and it looks beautiful and it's great. I don't like ivy on brick. I just see it pulling mortar out and bricks falling off. That's what I see. Like people see the beauty of the plant and I'm like, that sounds terrible.
It's funny you mentioned that, Marcus. My husband and I, we were at, I think, Kohler a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, Natasha, the brick wall with the ivy on it, it's so pretty. I'm like, I know you like it, but listen, it pulls out mortar, Jason. I'm like, yeah, do that if we get a house. I'm like, no. And he's like, but it's so pretty. I said, I know, but I've been yelled at by real estate agents for like the last 15 years about that. So the hard no on this end.
Yeah.
right?
So I don't know how
Yeah.
epoxy would bind to it, but from what I do know, working within the restaurant industry, all of our kitchen, our cooler, our food prep area was either tile or metal.
Right.
That was our two
tile,
substances we had to work with.
metal, FRP paneling, and then if you only have drywall, there are very inexpensively out at Home Depot, you can get food grade quality food surface washable paint. And what you're going to do is you can paint your drywall, yeah, so that you can wash it. You just have to like do a day shutdown every 6 months to like repaint. You know, it doesn't last
I wonder
forever.
if that's not an enamel, because the enamel would come off. I'm
I
wondering
don't
what the
know-
base
I don't
of
know
that
what
is.
it is, but it's all USDA, FDA compliant, and it's really a pretty low cost solution. Because when I was talking with this person, I was like, look, if this is what you can, is this the only thing that you have access to? Then we will deal with it. I've never been in a facility that I couldn't make compliant, right? It may cost time and money, but I will get you to compliance. And so I said, okay, do FRP paneling, okay, up to like 8 feet. And they said, okay, we can probably do that, right? And then you put flashing at the brick and you seal it at the top and all that sort of stuff, right? And the town came back to them and they're like, nope, you have to do FRP paneling all the way up, which was like ridiculously expensive. It was 15-foot ceilings or something like that. So we had to give up on that.
You made it go all the way to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which I had never heard of before, but but these local zoning codes can be no joke, and they will, if you're trying to create a food manufacturing space, especially out of warehousing space, you will run up against your local zoning ordinances and building codes and things like that. And one of the reasons this all happens is because people are not building food manufacturing space anymore, right? Because there's not a lot of money in it. We've got, when you look at warehousing space, right, what they're really trying to move is the office space. We've got great office space, and yeah, I guess there's warehousing here too, but food manufacturing space is very hard. It's very hard to find. The inventory that we have across the country is old. So, old. Yeah. And the food industry is not one that has, embraced with like love and tenderness the idea of preventive maintenance.
Yeah.
They really haven't. Food manufacturing by and large is like a generation or two behind other kinds of manufacturing because we just haven't needed, there hasn't been the regulatory push for it, and people don't, foodborne illness, people get sick from it. 3,000 people a year die of foodborne illness, lots of other people get sick, but the stuff that's actually in the food is really what we worry about, cross-contamination and stuff coming from the equipment versus the floors, walls, and ceilings. Though we do have recalls, like we've talked about, all those Listeria recalls, it's all facilities. It is all facilities based.
Yeah, and I wonder if the setback from those medium capacity facilities was because when we went to mass producing quickly. Like everybody had their little mojo of how they're creating their food, and then they outsourced to this bigger factory because it's cheaper rather than keeping their thing going, just leveling themselves up to the medium class where they could produce. But now, because we jumped from small to mega, all of those in-betweens kind of lost the upgrades and lost the cleanliness and lost the, okay, we need to upgrade to here to make this compliant. And now as we're trying to set ourselves, not backwards, but down to be more local, now we want those facilities, but they're not upgraded. So now the people going into that, which are those smaller businesses, well, some of them smaller going bigger, some of them bigger going smaller, end up in that middle. And now it's those companies that are going to fit the bill to get that thing up to go.
Right. And what ends up happening, especially, I moved from Maine and we have a working waterfront in Portland, and there are all these beautiful buildings. They're brick, they're the old, they're old mills or up and down the coast and things like that. And you end up building a building within the building.
That stinks.
Yeah, it's an incredibly expensive way to do it. And then we wonder why local food is so expensive.
Yeah.
You know, because it's, you know, when you think about it, so I recently worked on a project to do 100 head a day cattle slaughter facility. Okay, 100 head a day. At the end of the day, the thing was going to cost $35 million, right? But over the course of like 5 years, it would put 100 or 150 million dollars into the local economy, right? It was like a brilliant, it was a really, really good plan. Sustainable, like you got to be able to get 100 head of cattle a day into a cattle facility, which is like a non-trivial problem when you're talking about local beef, because we don't do concentrated animal feeding operations. There are no gigantic feedlots for local beef. We had this whole, you did a feasibility study, had a place to put it, you know, did the engineered designs and all of that sort of stuff, and had a really hard time financing it because all the people who do the ag financing are like, well, you know, we could spend $35 million and finance you, or we could spend $100 million and finance something we know works.
Yeah.
You know, and do a 5,000 head a day plant or whatever it is. You know, there was an announcement a month ago or so where somebody up in South Dakota is going to do a $1.1 billion, 8,000 head a day plant, right? That's all brand new construction. There's nobody down at our end of the world that can even come close to financing anything like that. And so you have to go find buildings that you can actually, the small business can finance, and they don't exist. And new construction is so expensive and so hard.
Yeah. And the food production, from what I've been hearing, has been already kind of pinched a little bit. I mean, their costs are going up. Commercial space is already at a premium. It's gotten a little bit better now since everybody's kind of pulling back, but since COVID, commercial has been hurt in the office space realm because everybody working from home. That still doesn't free up food manufacturing. Manufacturing is still in the same position because they're landlocked. They can only go to certain places. So they're getting pinched there by the landlord. Their costs of feed and fuel is also going up. And now they need to renovate buildings. So like their cost is going up even more. I'm anxious to see what happens to the food supply and the pricing with that. That's going to be the future question mark.
Yeah. And it's really, you know, where there's so many ways that we can tackle this problem. But one of the things that we really need to do is like go to our planning and zoning meetings, right? And encourage our local officials and talk to our local officials about what we build in our towns. We have to have capacity to do light manufacturing, which is what all food production is, like light manufacturing. This is not, no, we're not doing metal smelting, but you know, there's almost this idea that it isn't like heavy manufacturing, it doesn't mean anything, you know, and it's not, if you're only creating 20 jobs, who cares? But, you know, I would rather, and this is one of the things that coronavirus taught us is that our food supply is vastly more secure if we have 100 companies providing 20 jobs rather than one company providing 2,000 jobs.
Right.
You know, but in order for that to happen, there literally has to be the real estate for maker spaces where people can make the food we want to consume. And in order to do that, we got to go headlong into NIMBYism or bananaism or whatever it is that you want to call it, where people deserve to, you know, have light manufacturing not an hour away, because there are no manufacturing jobs that pay well enough for a 2-hour commute every day.
That's why they usually live on the farms.
Right, exactly. Great, but then you live on the farm, and then there's the psychic toll of never not being at work.
Yes,
that is true too.
That's the toll of working at home.
I was just gonna say that's the one bad part about working at home. I never shut my computer off. I finally started putting my phone on do not disturb because I just needed a break. Right. And so, you know, and there are tons of people who run restaurants who live above the restaurant.
and that's it, like, that's a thing, but that's in an urban environment. So,
I think we kind of went about this whole podcast backwards because I want to know how you got into this field.
That's usually our first question. We missed that.
I know, that's why
we missed the first question. I apologize.
No, we're totally good. Okay, so now that you all know that I know what I'm talking about, I tell you how I learned what I was talking about. So as I was saying at the top of the podcast, I'm a regulatory veterinarian. Okay, I went to the University of Georgia College of Veterinary Medicine, and while I was at Georgia, I got a scholarship from the U.S. Army. So I'm actually both kinds of vets. I'm a veteran veterinarian.
Well, thank you for your service.
You're so welcome. And what nobody knows is that the Army veterinarians are the Department of Defense executive agent for food safety. What does that mean? That means that anytime anybody eats in a Department of Defense facility, whether it's a submarine, an Air Force carrier, the PX on base at the gas station, the commissary, or the White House, anytime anybody eats there, the Army veterinarians have in some capacity put their eyes on that food and the process of making that food.
Interesting.
So you are the Army Defense of Food.
We are, and I served at Fort Monmouth in New Jersey, and then the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And I served from 2006 to 2009 during the height of the surge downrange. And we were very worried that Al-Qaeda was going to come and attack us through our food source. We were very worried about our cadets and our midshipmen and the gals out of the Air Force Academy, because it would be a really big like psychological blow, right? Yeah. And so I did food inspection based on not only do we have pathogens coming into this food, because you got to package your MREs correctly, you got to package all the salads.
Those are my lunches. I love MREs. They are so good.
I do not love MREs because I've eaten them.
Oh, you've eaten them for years.
More often than I wanted to.
If you don't know what MREs are, they're they're like, they come in this plastic bag, and everything you want to eat is in this pouch. It's got like cookies. It has everything from like toothpaste to your main course in a little plastic bag that you take out, and you have to put some water in a bag and it heats your main course up. Yeah. They got cookies.
It's the fanciest camping food you've ever heard of.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But my brother works for the military, so like he got me hooked on them. They're nice when you travel because they're light and you can put them in your backpack and you always have food. Right. And they're packed with nutrients.
Yeah, they're super nutrient and very calorie dense. And so so whether you're eating MREs or you're eating, I used to do, there was a place that made Skinny Pop ice cream bars that was commissary. Like I went and inspected them. They were very nice people. And so the reason we do this is because an army travels on its stomach. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what we learned from Napoleon, and it continues to be true today. So we have to inspect all the food so that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines could stay at good fighting capacity. I had a buddy who in Fallujah in 2006, when he was a major in the Marine Corps, they had an outbreak of foodborne illness because somebody cooked the chicken bad, and they went down to 76% fighting strength, which is a catastrophe range in 2006. Like the Marine at a forward operating base, Marines at 76% capacity was like a serious issue. And so I learned how to do food inspections. I learned all about the regulatory field, but because I was in the New York tri-state area and I was servicing not only Fort Monmouth, but Fort Hamilton, which is like a big Marine Corps recruiting base. I served Mitchell Field all the way out on Long Island. I had Colts Neck Naval Weapons Station, and then plus all the way up to West Point. I looked at all the roach coaches that came on base at Fort Hamilton. And where did they make their food? What were their commercial kitchens? All the fishmongers that sold fish, because they all bought local fish because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
All the fish people. I inspected the M&M factory in Hackstown, New Jersey, because it went into MREs.
Yep.
And so what I
Love
learned,
the M&Ms and the MRE. Keep those coming.
right? And so what I learned how to do was crawl around the smallest of facilities, a 2,000 square foot USDA inspected facility making kosher food in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, right? Where it's, me, the goy, like crawling around the basement, going upstairs, it's 2,000 square feet, three stories.
Yikes.
And so most people who have my background, they go work for the USDA or the FDA or your state Department of Agriculture. I went to go work for small business because when I was trying to feed my family, I was trying to find local meat and local dairy and local produce. And everybody was like, oh my God, I can't deal with the inspectors. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I am an inspector. And I know all the inspectors because they're all most of them are Army reservists, and we all train together. And I was like, and I can write the paperwork, it's not that hard. And I'm really good at paperwork, it turns out. And that's how my business started. I was asked by Maine's largest organic cattle producer whether or not I could write a food safety plan for him for a facility he was building out of his barn on his property, because he wanted to stop paying somebody else to make his hamburgers and realize all of that profit for himself. And so over the course of 7 years, he built a food production facility on his property. And I went there and I walked around. We looked at floors, walls, and ceilings, covered up some insulation, added some gaskets to some doors, cleaned up the bathroom a little bit, made a space for the USDA inspector. And we put a USDA production facility, very not large, 1,500 square feet, on their farm. And in coronavirus, it literally saved the farm.
That's awesome.
Good
timing for that one.
Right. And they're still clients. We love them. And they're, so that's how my business started, because I have this passion to help small businesses be both stronger and more profitable through applying food safety really well. And it turns out food safety affects every single part of the business model.
Yeah, it is true. And it's something that gets overlooked easily, because I'm going to go to the grocery store and there's going to be food there.
Right.
And everybody just blindly trusts that food, because as a label on it, is clean. And they forget about the steps that you have to take to make sure that it is clean, because it exchanges hands so often to get to its final destination. So people like you and in that industry are the ones that do the checks and balances to make sure that goes. And I want to get into, because it's kind of leading into the future of what you see. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you oh man, I lost the question. We're gonna have to edit that out, Natasha. Oh, it was a question on that topic that you were just talking about. You were military based. You knew the other inspectors because they were trained with you in the military. Do a lot of the food inspectors come from military? Is that the natural progression?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if you you join the military. Nobody joins the military and says I really want to be a food inspector. But the military has all these jobs they got to fill, and we have both. I was an officer because I have a doctorate. So I led all of these enlisted soldiers that were what we called Romeos. So there were 68 Romeos. And it's a good job in the military if you are good at paperwork. I think you have to have a pretty high ASVAB score to get it. Okay. But it's a pretty good job, because you do a lot of training. You work in a grocery store and you really learn the food code and you learn the meat poultry products. Inspection Act, and there are 1,000 jobs waiting for people to get out. So in meat inspection and FDA inspection and things like that, there are not a whole lot of food science grads that just graduate with an undergrad. Most people go on for a master's or a PhD, and then they go teach food science. So most people don't know, there's like a 40,000 person gap in like undergrad food science degrees for people to go do quality assurance, inspections, audits, all of that sort of stuff. And so all my friends and all like my colleagues who came out of the military Romeo program, they go get pretty high speed jobs. One of them came out and was in charge of food safety at Amazon for like 6 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He came out as like, I think an E6, and he went and Amazon, it was when Amazon was like starting their food safety program, recognizing they put so much food through there that they had to have some standards.
Yeah.
He went in and he set up those standards. So there are a lot of people that come out of the military in the food business and then go into like kind of mid-level managerial jobs in American food plants.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to go there and for it to start there, because one, you do have a group of people that it's like a little microcosm of the US or of whoever you're going to serve. It could be the world if you're a big enough factory, but to go into it with the discipline you need and the guidelines that they're going to enforce for their military, and take all of that regulation and knowledge and bring it into the public market.
Right.
It seems like a very good baseline to start. You gain the discipline, you gain the knowledge, you follow the regulatory systems that if they're going to implement them in the military, they're probably going to implement them for the rest of the civilians within that region. So it did make sense, but you mentioned something. I wanted to make sure I heard it correctly, but.
Well, yeah. And I will tell you, as a veteran who works in food, I am completely of the opinion that every food manufacturing facility in the country needs an E6, which is like a staff sergeant. Yeah. And so they're not like a brand new sergeant, but they're not so far removed from being a junior enlisted that they don't know how to do the work. And so I'm constantly telling people, if you are looking for a plant manager, go to your local, they're called a DVOP, your Disabled Veterans Opportunity something. I don't know, there are VA employment centers in every city. You can go talk to those people and say, I need an E6, right? Yeah. Because I can train them in how to follow a food safety plan. But what you can't, and you can train team management and leadership and stuff like that. And I do train people in that. But if you have already been inculcated in, here are all the rules and expectations we have to follow, here's all the metrics we have to meet, and then you go meet them, which is what all E6s do in the military, like a food manufacturing facility can have a lot more success.
I will tell my brother when he retires from the military, because I think he's E6 or E7, he's got a job waiting for him in food.
Right, and they're all like, the last plant manager position that we put an E6 in, it was $125,000 a year to work in a small meat manufacturing plant on a farm in a beautiful section of the country.
I'm sure my brother would enjoy working on a farm. He wants only country. That's about it.
Right. Yeah. So he's got to get in touch with me because I guarantee.
I will let him know. I think he's got like 13 more years left, but when that happens, I'm sure he'll jump into, he's going to have to jump into the civilian workforce. So we'll tell him about food manufacturing.
Absolutely.
And talking in the future, we've touched on like the movement within the industry, people pulling back from like the mass producers, some of the smaller ones getting bigger. We've got external forces with not our food, but the food that our food is eating is getting more expensive. Fuel to get that food there is getting more expensive. We've got a whole lot of outside forces pressing on the food industry. With you being in it, where do you see the next 5-10 years going in terms of price, quality, distribution, regulatory? Do you see any big changes coming? Do you see things hitting us, or kind of what's your feel?
I think regulatorily, I don't think there's going to be much change. We had a big change in 2011, which was like an update to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1938. And so.
Oh, it took that long to get updated?
Yeah. So there are going to be some tweaks and a few add-ons to that rule called the Food Safety Modernization Act. We are not going to be really updating the Meat and Poultry Products Inspection Acts. I don't really see that happening. We update the food code every 2 years, and there are not going to be any big changes. I really don't think with that. The big changes regulatorily that are going to come down are going to be around food fraud and economically motivated adulteration. So substituting your canola, like canola oil for olive oil, that kind of stuff. We're going to get tighter restrictions on that. There is already a law in place around that. So I think food defense is going to be kind of like a big thing and protecting the food supply that way. The biggest issue for the next 5 years, though, is climate change and its impacts on the food supply and where we grow our food. This is a very big deal, and we are not putting in place the things we need to actually do something about it. There are plenty of people studying it, but there are a limited number of ways that you can apply your PhD unless you're actually willing to go out and dig in the dirt. So climate change and its impacts are going to be a really, really big deal. Okay. The other thing that I see is we have rising pathogens that we haven't particularly thought about. So Bacillus cereus, nobody thinks about Bacillus cereus. But
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's Bacillus cereus is the bacteria that it creates a toxin, and it's what makes you sick when you leave your pasta or your rice out overnight and leave it and eat it the next morning. Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, and you can die from it. It's pretty bad. But cases of Bacillus cereus are on the rise. Cases of Cryptosporidium are on the rise because the issue is that the bacteria and the pathogens and the viruses and the parasites, their DNA is just as competitive as our DNA and can move faster than ours can. They are evolving faster. The listeria, it takes less listeria now to make you sick than it did 20 years ago. Because the listeria is just more pathogenic. So I think our viruses and bacteria are going to get more pathogenic. The other thing that is coming up is when we talk about food safety, we talk about pathogens, but chemical hazards, okay, which, chemicals are things, everything's basically a chemical, right? And the dose makes the poison, but they're the things that in excess make our foods harmful to us. So things like mycotoxin, we're seeing way more mycotoxin recalls. I think it has to do with climate change. Right? The planet is hotter, things are not drying out, molds are forming, molds create toxins. That's how that works. So I think we're going to see increases in chemical hazards. There was a report out from the FDA this week about how much heavy metal contamination we actually have in our food. And if you think the issue with the formula is just that the plant in Michigan got shut down for killing babies, the issue was actually way bigger than that. The FDA sampled and they found detectable levels of inorganic metals in the baby formula.
Oh, right.
Okay? Same thing in that fat-free chocolate milk that's in all of our schools. Detectable levels of cadmium, chromium, things that are not supposed to be in milk, right? Lead in our foods. So I think those sorts of environmental contaminants are going to become really a lot more important as we move forward and look at the future. And so what does that mean in terms of getting yourself facilities? Honestly, everybody's going to need more warehousing.
Yeah.
Because nobody buys enough warehousing. And because it's expensive and you're like, well, I'm just sitting on inventory. I'm like, yeah, but we got to test that inventory. I'm squawking my head off at people around a law out in California that's around heavy metals. It's called Prop 65 and, all sorts of contaminants and things like that. But It takes 2 weeks to get those tests back. And your product needs to sit on QA hold.
Yeah.
While that happens, and all of that is driving up prices. And I think it's going to mean that food facilities are moving out. We do a lot of urban food production. I think it means food facilities are going to move to ex-urban areas, which is good. I mean, we need jobs there, so I'm not that upset about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really where the future, like when we talk from a real estate perspective, where the future lies. And I think there's a lot to be said for what I call goats. Okay, which yes, greatest of all time, but you know, when we look in the investments industry, everybody's looking for a unicorn, right? Everybody's looking for a unicorn. And unicorns are rare. Unicorns are, you know, they can do no wrong, all of that sort of thing. I don't really think that they exist in an investments world. And what I tell people is that they need to be a goat, right? Goats are in the background. They eat the medium shrubbery that nobody else wants, okay? If you get a good goat, they'll produce meat, they'll produce milk, she'll have kids, she'll throw 2 kids a year, right? You can make a lot of money on a goat. I was a Peace Corps volunteer and we did goat projects, right?
Gotcha.
And so, but our businesses, everybody wants to be a unicorn because they think, I'm gonna get a private equity investment, I'm gonna be, a $1 billion investment, and that's not gonna happen to people. And even the people that it happens to really don't stop having problems, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
And but instead what we need throughout the country is people willing to be goats, willing to say, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to be profitable, I'm going to be over here doing my thing, producing for my local economy, right? And then we distribute the risk of our food production system, because okay, we get, some goes down over here in this county. Well, then we shift over to this county and we can feed ourselves while this county comes back online.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the one thing that you didn't mention that I was reading on with the things that are in our foods, you're talking about the metals and the other pathogens. One thing that I was reading was Teflon.
Yeah.
Teflon is in our water and in our food, and it's something that we're having trouble with, that we can't, like, it's not something you can just easily take back out.
No, it's not. And there was actually an FDA hearing about it this week or last week. And there, one of the things that we have that we're going to run up against is, okay, our detection equipment, our testing equipment now can detect all of this stuff. What do we do about it?
Yeah.
Right. So now that we have this knowledge, what do we do about it? So
yeah.
And nobody knows. We don't. Okay, great. We can detect, all of the, bisphenols and PFAS and all that sort of stuff. But what do we do about it? What do we do for the mothers who have all of the Teflon contamination in their breast milk?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no.
And it's a problem that we haven't had before, because during I would say it was around the Industrial Revolution or right after, as we started getting the bigger meat or food production buildings and factories, and they didn't have those back then. So I think we've been riding that kind of wave all the way through, and now it's kind of hitting an impasse where it's like, okay, we got us that far, but now we have to start refining it and making it better.
Yeah.
And now we're coming up with more tests, and now it's like, okay, now we have the tests, but now our next problem is, now what?
Now what? Right.
I'm imagining the tests getting better, so maybe they don't come back in 2 weeks. Now we can make it a week or 5 days, something quicker there, which means less inventory for them. Something's got to go, and I'm sure the people that are in there, like yourself, are going to keep pushing and getting that stuff better and getting it more refined. So thank you for your efforts as the rest of us sit and eat the fruits of your labor, literally.
So, Marcus, I hate to have to wrap it all up.
Yeah, we're wrapping up right now.
But I do think we need to have her back on again, because this is a super interesting conversation, and I only feel like we can go down more and more rabbit holes next time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know you mentioned earlier in the show, but I want to get that in the show notes. What is the best way for people to find out about you or contact you with questions or inquiries?
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find on the internet, but you can come find me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure I'll send you the URL and share it in the show notes. I'm on Instagram at Food Safety University, because I run Food Safety University, where I teach people all of this sort of stuff. And then you can always send an email to info@dirigofoodsafety.com.
Awesome.
Right?
We'll make sure to put those in the show notes. We will schedule you back on for another show, because I want to see, as things evolve, where the food industry is going.
Absolutely.
So I think you'd be a great resource to kind of keep us on some sort of a need to know what's going on with the food you're eating kind of basis. So we'll get you back. Thank you for your time. Lots of knowledge. We appreciate it. And have yourself a wonderful weekend.
All right. Thanks. Y'all too.
Bye.
Bye.